Hi everyone, I just wanted to give you a friendly reminder that every time you say a sentence in English, if you say a regular indicative sentence, you have to start with the subject. So you have to say either the pronoun or the noun. Spanish has that flexibility of structure where you can say the verb first or you can say the subject first. In certain sentences in Spanish, it sounds better to say the verb first. For example, cambió la situación. That sounds better than la situación cambió. The truth is that you can say both, either one, in Spanish, but in English it has to be the situation changed. This is probably the most fundamental rule in all of English. Here are a couple examples where my students have reversed the order of the subject and verb because that's how they would say it in Spanish. Is coming people that work at Amazon. Claro, porque estamos pensando, está viniendo gente que trabaja. So every time in Spanish, when it sounds better, you just can't do it in English because is coming, well, who is coming? So people who work, and people is plural, so it should be are coming. People who work at Amazon are coming. Chose my wife. He wanted to say, my wife chose. My wife chose the place where they went to eat. Was a soccer player. Estaba pensando, era un jugador. Yeah, but we have to have the pronoun first, the subject first. He was a soccer player. Now is a teacher working with me. So if you want to say, ahora está un profe trabajando conmigo, you have to say, ahora un profe está trabajando conmigo. Now a teacher is working with me. Is everything close? Is everything close? This sentence sounds structurally like an interrogative, like a question. Is everything close? ¿Está todo cerca? Right? If you want to say it as an indicative, the subject has to go first. Everything is close. A lot of my students, the ones who said these sentences, probably know better. The problem is when they start to try to speak fast and fluently, sometimes they revert in their minds or they translate directly from Spanish in their minds. And all I can tell you is that if there's one thing, one fundamental rule in English, as you can see, what the suffice formula elucidates, what it illustrates is that the verb always, the principal verb, not the modal or the auxiliary verb, that's another story. The principal verb always comes after a subject. Among all of the 7 or most of the 7 structures in contemporary conversational English, the verb comes after the subject. Subject, verb. That's rule number 1. Yesterday told me my sister about this book. Yesterday my sister told me about this book. Called me another manager and he told me about one of the possible projects here in Madrid. And he told me about one of the possible projects here in Madrid. Good. Called me another manager? No. Another manager called me. Subject first. I'm just going to keep repeating it. When finished the class, I will go. When the class finishes, I will go. Cuando termine la clase. And notice here that in Spanish you would use a subjunctive. Cuando termine. That subjunctive kind of means the future because when you talk about a class in general ending, you would say, cuando termina la clase, siempre voy, right? Cuando termina la clase, siempre voy al parque. But if you're talking about this class right now that in the future, in the near future, will end, in Spanish, you would say, cuando termine. In English, tercera persona singular presente. Cuando la clase termina. When the class finishes. In this case, we don't use a subjunctive. Someone said, some of my best friends, they are photographers. What's wrong with this sentence? Well, you do have the subject at the front, but then you also have the pronoun. You don't need the subject and the pronoun. Either cut out some of my best friends, they are photographers, or cut out they. Some of my best friends are photographers. The next day, phoned to my wife a friend of her. They wanted to say, el próximo día le llamó a mi esposa una amiga suya. So, piece by piece. The next day, who called? A friend of my wife, or you can say my wife's friend. Phoned to my wife is the predicate of the sentence. Because phoned is the verb, and to my wife, well, it's a direct object, so it doesn't need the to. You directly phoned that person, you called that person. So, the subject is my wife's friend. Verb, called. Object, her. My wife's friend called her. Or, a friend of my wife called her. Tomorrow is coming my youngest daughter from Ireland. Tomorrow, my youngest daughter is coming. And from Ireland in this case is, it would be a compliment. But it's basically, complements and objects are basically, it's like the way you finish the sentence. But it's not the most important part of the sentence because it's always in the same place. So what you need to focus on mostly is the placement of the subject and the main verb. Did she, okay, aquí preguntó, did she try to marry again after her husband? After her husband died. This is an independent clause, her husband died, together with after, now making it a dependent clause, a subordinate clause, that is attached to the longer sentence. Did she try to marry again after her husband died? Made me sad when she said that. Made me sad, right. Me hizo triste. Me hizo. ¿Qué te hizo? ¿Qué cosa? We have to say la cosa or we have to say it, por lo menos. It made me sad when she said that. If I open the hot water in the kitchen, falls cold water in the shower. So first of all, when you abres el grifo in Spanish, you turn on the tap or you turn on the faucet. The faucet is the metal pipe. So turn on the water, turn on the faucet, turn on the tap. Lights, you turn on the lights, right? Encender, turn on the water. So if I turn on the hot water in the kitchen, that's good because I, subject, turn on, verb, the hot water, object. In the kitchen, a complement, prepositional phrase. But the next phrase, falls cold water, should be cold water falls. And in this case, I wouldn't say falls, I would say cold water comes out. Cold water comes out. Two phrasal verbs. If I turn on the hot water in the kitchen, cold water comes out, sale, in the shower. Yesterday happened to me. Ayer, la cosa de lo que se esté hablando, no sabemos exactamente, me pasó a mí. Yesterday, it happened to me. We have to say the it. Well, I hope this video cleared it up for you. Make sure every time, subject first. It can be the proper noun or it can be the pronoun. There are exceptions and I will do a separate video on the exceptions because there's so few, but they are worth talking about. For the most part, I would say this is like the universal constant in English. If there's one thing that is always true, it is that the main verb comes after the subject. Whether you are asking a yes or no question, a W-word question, whether you're making a negative adverbial statement or an indicative statement or an exclamation. Subject first. Subject, verb. That's rule number one.